Hello friends, in this video we're going to look at this Toshiba DVD video player model SD-2800. This was made in 2002, right Scooter? And I did a little research and it turns out DVDs were invented in about 1996 and Blu-ray was invented in about 2006. So, you know, this is basically right in the middle of the Blu-ray period. Right, Scooter? And I think this is a fairly deluxe unit for its time. It can play MP3s and all varieties of CDs. I got this at a thrift store. It was priced at $10 originally, half off, sold as is. You can see by the date that it's been sitting around for about a month as of when I got it. I got it half off and with a senior discount, so that brings my price down to about $4. Quite the deal if you need such a thing. Right, Scooter? So here we look at the back. We can see video, composite video, S-video, component, left, right, analog, coaxial, and optical outputs. So my intention is to use this as a sort of a premium CD player. So here on the front it says we have 192 kilohertz and 24-bit audio DAC. So I'm hoping that the audio section output of this is really really good. Now, you know, it's also possible that it just has a lot of bits and hertzes, but it doesn't really have a good, you know, analog audio section. And I found in other cases that that can be the determinant on this sort of thing. So we'll find that out. For historical record, here's the manufacturing date, model number, and so on. 15 watts. Got this plugged in, but before I turn it on, I'm going to do a quick cleanup on it. You can see it's got some grime on top. So we'll be back with that in 3, 2, 1. So the cleaning helped a little bit, but you know, we've got scratches and things. Looks like it has paint splatter on it here. I'll work on that some other time. But let's turn it on and see what happens. Oh, I see a red light here already. That's a good sign. Here's a display. Made kind of a nasty grinding sound. Okay, the tray comes out. So I put in my CD of free YouTube music. Keep the YouTube copyright cops at bay. Oh, that sounds really nasty. Okay. Well, maybe this is a parts piece. Oh. That sounded absolutely terrible. Did it destroy the CD? No? Well, I heard a little bit of music, kind of stuttery, so looks like we're going to skip ahead and go ahead and pull the lid on this thing and see if something simple is going on. And maybe it'll be a parts piece and maybe it'll be fixable. So this is similar in the way the lid works to a Sony that I just took apart. It had one screw on each side, 3 on the back. Let's see what's going on in here. First of all, let's do the rattle test. Is there anything loose in there? Oh, Scooter's going to play with the screws if I don't do something with those. He's got a screw loose. So we've got kind of a similar topology to the Sony unit that I just took apart. This is a power supply board. I can tell right away it's a switching power supply. This white line kind of demarcates the high voltage section from the low voltage section. Well, have to put away the screws here. I'll be right back. So I put away the screws. You can see this is the main the DVD drive unit in the center. We've got a processor board. This has a Zoran chip on it, which is probably a video processor from this era. Some supporting components. I'm guessing this is a memory chip. This is probably the audio output chip, or maybe do all of the outputs, who knows. Let's take a quick look at the back of the front panel. So on the Sony, that kind of went all the way across. Here we've got kind of a separate little board for the power switch. Other parts we can see here, I believe this is the D to A converter. That's an Analog Devices part. Here I know from the one that I looked at, the Sony one, you see these sort of metal fins through the center. Those are kind of a mini heat sink that goes with, this is a motor control chip. So it's controlling the drive mechanism motors. This might be some sort of microcontroller chip. And somehow they've divided up the duties of the controller part of this with the audio and video drivers. So knowing what I know now, I bet this is a video driver. Here's the overall crystal reference for the whole unit. So that's an overview of the parts that we're looking at. So this has the tray in the center. The Sony had it on the left, and that kind of affects the way that the front panel layout is going to work. So this is pretty basic stuff. Having shaken it around, I haven't found anything wrong with it in the shake sense. There's nothing loose in there. It's either fixable, a parts piece, or it could just be an autopsy type thing. Usually with units like this with a high integration, you can't really reuse many of the parts. There are plenty of these CD drive carousels around. A lot of times those have good stepper motors and things. I'm going to kind of be careful and keep my hands out of it, but plug it back in. And then we'll do power. So it closed itself. That's about normal. So the rattle seems to be in this area. Maybe whatever it was using for bearings is no good. That might be something to investigate. Let's try again. Since this is a CD that I burned myself, I'm not too worried about it if it gets destroyed. Let's see what happens when we start to play that. Loading, it says. So looks like overall something is fishy in the drive mechanism. Maybe the rest of it's just fine. Let's see if it still says loading. Okay, now it's making that nasty rattle again. You can tell the motor speed is kind of uneven. It's kind of revving up and down. That could indicate a bad motor control, or maybe even something bad on the power supply. So I'm a little disappointed that this didn't work out as what I intended to be for kind of an audio test unit. But I think realistically this is going to turn into a parts piece. Well, if I was ever going to fix this, I'd certainly need to take it apart, and I'm most of the way along there. One of the puzzles of this is that I need to pull this drive mechanism out, but you can see that the tabs on the tray are too wide. There's a plastic piece that blocks those here, and so how does that work? And I've figured out, I'll show you, that this is one of those things, as you can imagine a lot of mass-produced things are, that are kind of designed to be put together but not taken apart. So there's this little locking tab here, and if you push or pull on that, so that's a little latch that relieves this to come all the way out, separate from the drive unit. So if you sort of reverse this in your mind, the assembler is just, this is already living inside here maybe, and the assembler is just going to poke this in, it latches, and we're done. This also had kind of a clip system. It's kind of hard to see around here, but we have these clips that clip onto the metal chassis here. We've got this piece that's kind of a mechanical support piece that I can pull out now. Now we can get a really good look inside the drive. And the thing that's kind of puzzling about this is this seems to want to have a bearing in the top of it, but I kind of don't think it does. Maybe this unit just doesn't come up high enough to you know, kind of get it loose from where it's normally captive. So let's look at this from a reuse point of view. We've got there must be a rack gear here on the bottom of the tray, so you can imagine that couples to this gear, and all of this is the tray mechanism, and you can see it's all mechanically interconnected where the motor rises and mates up with this, assuming there's a disc in between. There's more gears, and this is obviously the laser unit that actually reads the disc, whatever kind you have. Oh, this is attached to a stepper motor to move the laser unit. Let's look at that from underneath. So that's on a nice little metal track. That's the only metal part aside from screws and kind of this whole thing. Here's some sort of a maybe driver or sensor receiver type chip for the that goes with the laser element. We've got some little shock cushions here, these blue pieces, some kind of interface board. So this motor is the main tray motor. Here with a little green tag you can see the spindle motor. So visually speaking, I don't see anything wrong here. There's kind of nothing obvious that could be fixed. So we're kind of back to the element of using this as a parts piece. So from a parts point of view, as I said before, we don't really have much we can get interested in here. You know, we could maybe pull all the capacitors, but you know, they're not worth the effort. The power supply, which we can pretty much assume works from the signs of life that we had, you know, this could be useful as a reused piece, kind of as a whole. I've taken apart several of these switching power supplies, so I don't need any of the parts in here particularly. I've got some junk boxes full of those. But you can tell from all the different wires that's going on here that this has probably multiple voltages. We'd need, you know, probably plus and minus voltages to run the analog outputs, which would also include the composite video and S-video. We're going to need some other ones to run the drive motors and more to run the electronics of the unit. So the exact combination of voltages that we have here, you know, who knows if that's any kind of useful combination in some other project, maybe a little bit specialized. But this is a pretty easy thing to just pull off and throw in the junk drawer, and you know, maybe it'll find a new life, and maybe it'll ultimately end up as e-waste. So after having thought about this some more and looked at it some more, my theory is that this main spindle motor is got a problem, although it seems to run pretty smoothly with the finger. This top piece doesn't seem to have a bearing at all. It's just a plastic piece that kind of rides up above and is self-centered by the little cone on the spindle. So what I'm going to do is put in my trusty YouTube CD and kind of artificially move this up like so, and then see how well I can do manually spinning the CD. So that's going to be kind of a diagnostic step of, you know, what is it that's causing this rattle and grinding that we noticed earlier. Now here's another thing I've noticed that's kind of a problem. This little gear here is supposed to attach there, but it can get in a point where it's just not engaging at all, like you see now. So you can imagine that prevents this piece from rising in the normal way, which has the effect of sort of flopping the disc all around without the top piece to kind of keep it under control. And also we've got these nubs here that could rattle on the disc. In fact, let's look at the disc and see if we see any kind of scratches that... Okay, I don't see any scratches on the disc, although we do have lots of pretty colors. Whee! So maybe the entire fix for this unit would be to re-engage this little rack here, kind of leave it in the normal working position and not go too far like I just did. Okay, so if we go just to the very edge of where it still engages, I'm going to put in my CD and see if I can get it to run around without sort of rattling or anything. So I manually pulled that up. I'm going to just kind of spin this with my finger as much as I can. Notice that there's no rattling sound. So maybe that's the answer. I'm going to put it all back together and we'll find out if that fixed it or not. And if it didn't, it definitely becomes a parts piece. Earlier I skipped a lot of the disassembly process, but I'll kind of give you a tour of that while we do assembly here. This goes to the back of the drive unit. This goes onto the main chassis. I might have to look at some of my videos. This is backwards. Okay, that's the problem. That makes more sense. So this cable goes here. You can tell this one goes in here somewhere, and we've got one hanging off the end here that goes in at this point. So that's pretty easy, and I already know to attach the main piece, like I was saying earlier, of just plain pushing it through the front. So I'll go ahead and do a few more steps of assembly, and then we'll kind of show you the next kind of snap together phase. So I got this blue cable on the bottom on. That was pretty tricky. Had to use pliers to kind of push it in. A lot of resistance force. So I've got the drive unit firmly screwed in and attached with all its connectors, including this little ribbon over here. I've got this firmly attached, and its ribbon cables connected at this point and this point that were loose before. Now we can do our front panel board. I know from taking this apart it has kind of a snap system for most of it, as well as a couple of screws that holds it tight. You can see that this ribbon cable goes into the slot that it's kind of trying to get into right now. So here, just to show you, here's a side clip that we should see kind of snap. Nice snap sound that also snapped down here. We can go ahead and push this cable in. Okay, that's nice and firm. There's a grounding lug over here that I need to do. Got that ground lug put on, and as I said before, this just slides in like that, I guess that won't work with a disc inside it. That was kind of a goof. But we'll, for the sake of science, we'll leave the tray out for the moment and just see if turning it on causes this terrible rattling sound. I guess I also goofed by leaving this metal piece out, which goes approximately here. But again, we can live without that for the moment. So let's plug it in, see what happens. We'll see if it's a happy unit or not. Okay, our little red light's on again. We'll hit power. Okay, that's a success. There's no nasty noises going on here. I don't have it hooked up at the moment, but it's playing. No error messages. So I guess I'll take it apart a little bit and kind of redo the parts I goofed on, and then put the lid on, and then we'll show you the finished result. So having taken it apart a little bit more, I was able to pull the CD out, and I'm making sure that this critical gear and rack or pinion, I don't know which it is still intact. So if I were to turn this too far, I'd kind of be back where I started. And that seems to be the critical part of this. Now honestly, this seems kind of badly designed that it could get into that state in the first place, but you know, this is what you get for $300 in 2011 or whatever. The way this metal frame works, it kind of slips underneath here. See if I can do that with one hand. And you can see there's a nub that catches in here. And then we're going to put our screws back in, and this will be held in place. Now I'm sort of back where I was before, except I've got this metal piece in its right place and I've got the CD out. So we're going to try my theory of just pushing this in, and hopefully it will just kind of take care of itself. Now it has to engage with this gear. And this may be something I have to finagle, so I'll get back to you. So after a lot of trial and error, I think I know how this is supposed to work. I pushed the tray in a little bit and it got kind of wedged in there, wouldn't go any further. And that has to do with this rail can only slide so far. The sort of disconnected state it was in, I think, is actually a feature. We'll see when we push this in. You need to be able to push this in all the way without affecting this little bar over here. So let's say here it's engaged, but you push it over there, push this in. Now this piece forms a latch, and before you get it, or maybe after you get it all the way in there, you have to slide this to activate it, or maybe it takes care of itself. Okay, so the tray is in the right position. I need to activate this engagement here so that now maybe this is one of these. We'll have to tell you what the answer is when I'm done. So after much finagling, I got this tray back in. I'm not quite sure what the secret was, but we'll be happy about it. I'm going to put a disc in. That actually is making a lot of noise, but it's not a grinding noise like it was before. So when I put the lid on it, then hopefully it'll be good as new. Hey Scooter, are you excited to hear it work? Let's see if we can hear it work. On. Oh. Still making bad noises. Well, that does it. I guess it's a parts piece. Doesn't seem to work any better than it did before. So you can see it kind of sort of works, but I've definitely reached the point of no return on this, especially since it was sold as is. I've reached the point where it's time to stop on this thing. I've had enough fun. I hope you have had too. And I'm going to part it out in a future video, and we'll look at what the parts are that are inside it and how they can possibly be reused. In particular, I think the power supply has some potential. Get it? And also the CD player mechanism. One or of the motors may be bad, but maybe the other one's good. So we'll see how that goes. So that ends our video, right, Scooter? Thanks for watching. Well, more fiddling, and maybe I finally got it to work. I'll show you the key. Shut this off. This piece in the center seems to be kind of out of balance, and it had this little metal piece. There's a magnet inside, the round magnet seems to be getting out of balance again. Well, looks like it has some sort of balance recovery algorithm to it. That's why it kind of keeps stopping and starting. It's almost like it's detecting a problem and then trying to restart. So, much as I hate to say it, this is a parts piece. So I think with the rattling and so on it's doing, probably the simple explanation is that something is just plain worn out here. I think it's a lot better if I push down on this. So that kind of confirms my theory that the lower part isn't coming up far enough. Hear that? Okay, well, we may be able to save it still. So my prior experiment showed that there's too much of a gap between this top of the motor spindle and then the sort of the top of the unit spindle. So I put this CD back in again, and it's kind of hard to tell, but see, there's a little play there, and that's partly this top piece is kind of held down by a magnet, so it's easy to force it out. But ultimately I just need to raise the bottom up just a little tiny bit, and it's all in this mechanism that you see, this metal frame here, which is connected to the plastic with these 4 screws. There's these cushions which are blue here and green at the top for some reason. So what I think I can do is just take these out, put in another washer to give it an extra space. The total extra distance I need is, you know, approximately the thickness of a CD, so just an ordinary metal washer should probably do the trick. And as you saw from my earlier demo where I was pushing down on this, this doesn't flex very much, so we only need, you know, a little bit of change here to make this work reliably. It's kind of right on the edge, and my theory is that maybe these cushions kind of became depressed or whatever, or maybe some of the plastic parts wore over the lifetime of this unit, because it's getting to be pretty elderly. It's whatever, close to 15 years old, something like that. So I'll put the washers in and kind of put it back together once more and see if it works. Here's what I decided to use for spacers. I've got an ordinary washer and a lock washer, and the screw that came with it. I've already done 3 of these and I'm about to do this 4th one. So that might have been too tall with the lock washers, but I don't think there's any real downside in being too tall in this case, because it'll still spin. Got it spinning pretty well in that case. It isn't wobbling. And in the obvious way, of course, it'll wobble if I push down on it because the magnet kind of disengages. But I think we're ready to put it together for the 4th or 5th time and see what happens. I've got all the basic pieces put back together here, and I've been fiddling with getting this tray back in, and I think I've discovered the trick, which this goes all the way over to this side. And see this nub here? That goes into this rail, and this thing kind of organizes itself. So you can imagine from kind of an assembly point of view, this is kind of dead simple to put together in an assembly line if you know the trick, and everything kind of automatically lines itself up based on the design of the track and the plastic. So now you can see that everything's working pretty smoothly. So now we're ready to try it out again with a disc inside it. So the lid's back on. Try it one more time. Welcome. Play. Okay. I'm going to call this a success. We're going to wrap this one up. I'll be using this for a future audio test to look at the audio quality coming out of it and do some measurements on that. So look for that in a future video. And if anything goes wrong with this at some point, I have definitely run out of interest in it beyond my audio test. So then we'll do another video about dissecting it. But hopefully this will just keep working like a champ. So that ends our video. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.